My hands trembled as I gripped the doorframe, hearing my own daughter's voice cut through the silence. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless. Now." While her fingers danced across stacks of $100 bills, counting the $44 million inheritance. 4 days later, I was sitting across from a lawyer who slid a manila envelope toward me with a knowing smile, and suddenly I understood why my late wife had been so secretive about her will. Then she called me, her voice cracked. "Dad, please?" Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The sound of crisp bills being counted filled the room where I'd raised my daughter for 35 years. Melissa sat at her mother's antique desk, the same one where Barbara used to pay our bills and write her letters. But now, instead of grocery lists and birthday cards, stacks of hundreds covered every inch of the mahogany surface. My daughter's manicured nails tapped against the wood as she sorted the cash with the precision of a bank teller. $43,900,000, she murmured, not bothering to look up when I cleared my throat. The reading of Barbara's will had ended just 2 hours ago, and already Melissa had withdrawn a significant portion of her inheritance. The lawyer had handed her the keys to 3 bank accounts, 2 investment portfolios, and the deed to our family home. Everything I thought I knew about my wife's final wishes had crumbled in that sterile conference room. I stepped into what used to be our living room, my worn sneakers silent against the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself 20 years ago. The walls still held our family photos, but they felt different now, foreign, like artifacts from someone else's life. "Mel, we need to talk about what happens next. This house, the arrangements." She finally raised her head, and I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Gone was the little girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. Gone was the teenager who cried on my shoulder when boys broke her heart. This was someone else entirely, someone cold. "What arrangements, Dad?" "You heard the lawyer. Mom left everything to me. Everything." She gestured broadly at the room, at the house, at the life we'd built together. The evening light streaming through the bay windows caught the gold bracelet on her wrist, the one Barbara had given her for graduation. She twisted it absently as she spoke, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. But where Barbara's gestures had always been gentle, Melissa's movements were sharp, calculated. "I've already called a realtor. This place is worth at least $2.7 million in today's market. I'm thinking of renovating and flipping it, or maybe just tearing it down completely." I gripped the mantelpiece until my knuckles went white, but kept my voice steady. "This is our family home, Melissa. Your mother and I built our life here. We brought you home from the hospital to this house." I touched Barbara's last photo, the one from our 40th anniversary dinner, just 6 months before the cancer took her. She'd been so weak by then, but she'd insisted on wearing her blue dress, the one I'd complimented on our first date. "Build your life, sure, but Mom's gone now, and frankly..." Melissa stood up, straightening her designer blazer. The fabric was expensive. I could tell by the way it held its shape, unlike my own thrift store shirts. She'd always had expensive taste, even as a child. Barbara used to joke that Melissa had champagne preferences on a beer budget, but we'd always found ways to give her what she wanted. Piano lessons, horseback riding, private school. We'd scraped together every penny before Barbara's career took off. She walked past me to the window, her heels clicking against the floor with each step. The sound echoed in the quiet house, sharp and final. "Frankly, Dad, you're just taking up space now. I have plans for this money, real plans. I'm going to invest it properly, maybe start my own firm. I can't have you hanging around here like some kind of..." She paused, searching for the right word. The pause stretched between us like a chasm. "Like some kind of what?" I asked quietly. She turned back to face me, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of the daughter I used to know, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Like a burden, Dad. You're 70 years old. You haven't worked in 5 years. You contribute nothing to this household except grocery bills and doctor visits. Mom's not here to protect you anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in my recliner, the one Barbara had bought me for Father's Day 10 years ago. The leather was cracked now, worn from countless evenings reading bedtime stories to Melissa when she was small, Then later, from long nights worrying about her college tuition, her career, her happiness. I took care of your mother for 5 years while she was sick. I gave up my job, my retirement, everything we'd saved. And that was your choice, Melissa interrupted, her voice rising. Nobody asked you to do that. Mom could have gotten professional care. You could have put her in a facility. Instead, you drained our savings playing hero. She moved back to the desk, gathering the money into neat piles. Her movements were efficient, practiced, like she'd been planning this conversation for months. I watched her hands work, remembering how those same hands used to reach for mine when we crossed the street. How they'd trembled when she'd called me crying about her first heartbreak. How they'd hugged me tight when I'd walked her down the aisle at her wedding, a marriage that had lasted exactly 18 months before her husband realized that Melissa's love came with a price tag attached. Your mother wanted to stay home, I said finally. She was terrified of dying in some sterile room surrounded by strangers. So yes, I made that choice. I'll make it again tomorrow. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the family photos, the furniture we'd picked out together, the memories embedded in every corner. But I never thought that choice would cost me my daughter. Melissa's laugh was sharp, bitter. It didn't sound like her at all. Oh, please, don't make this about sentiment. This is about reality. You're old, you can't work anymore, and you're my responsibility now. Well, guess what? I don't want that responsibility. She zipped the money into a leather portfolio, the sound final and decisive. I've already talked to a few assisted living facilities. There's a decent one about an hour north. They have a payment plan. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, Barbara's father's clock, the one that had chimed every hour of our marriage. The sound that had once been comforting now felt like a countdown. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting after sitting in the lawyer's office all afternoon. What if I refused to go? Melissa's smile was thin, cold. She walked to the front door and opened it, letting in the cool evening air. The porch light flickered on automatically, illuminating the garden Barbara had tended for decades. The roses were still blooming, red and white, just like she'd planted them. Then find somewhere else to die. You're useless now. The finality in her voice sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the October wind. I walked toward the door, each step feeling like a surrender. But as I reached the threshold, I turned back one last time. Melissa was already back at the desk, counting money. She didn't look up when I spoke. Your mother always said she had a plan for everything. I'm starting to think she was right. I spent that night at the Motel 6 on Highway 9, the kind of place where the ice machine didn't work and the walls were thin enough to hear every conversation in the neighboring rooms. The $23 it cost came out of the $47 I had left in my wallet after buying gas. I lay on the scratchy comforter, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, and tried to understand how my life had collapsed so completely in the span of 24 hours. The next morning, I drove back to the house to collect some clothes and my medications. Melissa's BMW was gone, probably at the gym or meeting with more investors. I used my key, half expecting her to have changed the locks already. The house felt different in daylight, emptier somehow. More boxes had appeared overnight, filled with items she'd decided to discard or donate. A lifetime of memories sorted into neat piles for disposal. I was in the bedroom, packing my few remaining possessions into a duffel bag, when I heard her car in the driveway. Her heels clicked up the front steps, sharp and impatient. I continued folding my clothes, taking my time. Let her find me here. Let her explain why her own father wasn't welcome in his own home. Dad? Her voice carried up the stairs, surprised and annoyed. What are you doing here? I didn't answer. Instead, I zipped up the bag and walked downstairs, where she stood in the foyer, holding a stack of real estate brochures. Her expression shifted from surprise to cold calculation as she saw my packed bag. I came to get my things, I said simply. Good. I was going to call you later anyway. She set the brochures on the hall table luxury condos downtown, investment properties with high return potential. I've decided to put the house on the market immediately. The realtor thinks we can get $3.2 million if we stage it properly. I need you to be out by the end of the week. I looked around the entryway where I'd carried Melissa over the threshold when we brought her home from the hospital 35 years ago, where Barbara and I had stood on our wedding day, planning our future together, where we'd hung family photos and Christmas stockings and measured Melissa's height against the doorframe as she grew. This is still my home, Melissa. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Your home? Dad, you don't own anything. You have no income, no assets, and no legal claim to this property. Mom left it to me, remember? She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through messages. I've already called the assisted living facility. They have an opening next Monday. I'll drive you there myself if you can't arrange your own transportation. What if I refuse? She looked up from her phone, her eyes cold and distant. Then you'll be homeless. Is that really the hill you want to die on? She walked to the front door and held it open. I'm being generous by giving you until Monday. Don't test my patience. I stood there for a long moment, bag in hand, looking at the daughter I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for. The woman who could reduce 40 years of family to a real estate transaction. The person who'd become a stranger wearing my child's face. You know what the saddest part is? I said finally. Your mother saw this coming. She tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. I kept telling her you were just stressed, just scared about losing her. But she knew better. I walked toward the door, pausing beside her. She always knew better. I stepped out onto the porch, and this time Melissa closed the door behind me. I heard the deadbolt turn with a decisive click. Through the window, I could see her already on her phone, probably calling the realtor to schedule the first showing. I drove aimlessly through our neighborhood for 2 hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel of the 15-year-old Honda that Barbara and I had bought together. The leather seats were cracked, the radio only picked up AM stations, but it was paid for. Everything we'd owned had been paid for, once upon a time, before the medical expenses, before the treatments that insurance only partially covered, before I'd made the choice to give Barbara the best care possible, regardless of cost. The car rolled to a stop in front of Miller's Diner, the same place where I'd proposed to Barbara 42 years ago. Through the window, I could see the corner booth where we used to bring Melissa for pancakes every Sunday after church. She'd always ordered chocolate chips, extra whipped cream, and I'd watch her small face light up when the waitress brought her the plate stacked impossibly high. Barbara would whisper that I was spoiling her, but she'd be smiling when she said it. My phone buzzed against the dashboard. A text from an unknown number. Dad, it's me. Using a new phone for business. I need you to sign papers tomorrow. Lawyer's office, 10 a.m. Don't be late. No greeting, no explanation. Just instructions, like I was an employee she was managing from a distance. Inside the diner, I slid into our old booth and ordered black coffee. The vinyl seat was patched with silver tape now, and the Formica table was more scratched than I remembered, but the view was the same. Across the street stood the elementary school where I'd dropped Melissa off every morning for 6 years. I used to watch her run toward the building, her backpack bouncing with each step, always turning at the door to wave goodbye. The coffee arrived lukewarm, bitter. I wrapped my hands around the ceramic mug and let my mind drift back to 1998, when everything started to fall apart. Not the marriage that had stayed strong until the very end, but the financial pressures, the choices that led us here. I'd been 54 then, with what I thought was a secure job at the engineering firm. We'd just finished paying off the house, finally. Barbara had started talking about travel, maybe buying that little cabin by the lake she'd always dreamed about. Then Melissa's senior year arrived with its cascade of expenses: private college applications, SAT prep courses, the designer dress she absolutely had to have for prom. Each request came with tears, pleading, explanations of how her entire future depended on this one thing. Barbara and I would look at each other across the dinner table, having silent conversations with our eyes. How could we say no? How could we let our daughter down when we had the means to help her? The college acceptance letter from Northwestern came on a Tuesday in March. I still remembered the way Melissa had screamed with joy, jumping up and down in our kitchen until the dishes rattled in the cabinets. The tuition bill arrived 3 weeks later, $52,000 per year, for 4 years, plus room and board, plus books, plus the extras that Melissa insisted were essential for fitting in with her new classmates. Barbara had suggested community college for the first 2 years, then transferring. Melissa had locked herself in her room for 3 days, crying about how we were ruining her life, destroying her dreams. In the end, we'd taken out loans and I'd started dipping into my retirement fund, telling myself it was just temporary. Just until Barbara's consulting business took off, which it did spectacularly in the early 2000s. She'd built something remarkable before the cancer came. The waitress refilled my coffee without being asked. She was maybe 60, with kind eyes and comfortable shoes. The kind of woman who'd probably worked here for decades, who'd raised kids on tips and determination. "You look like you could use pie," she said, not really asking. "Apples fresh today?" I nodded, though I wasn't hungry. The pie arrived with a generous scoop of vanilla ice cream that was already starting to melt around the edges. I took a bite and tasted nothing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Melissa, sent to my personal account from what looked like a business address. The subject line read, "Estate settlement. Action required." The message was formal, cold. Legal language about property transfers and financial obligations. She'd CC'd someone named Jennifer Martinez, Esquire. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, was a single line. "Assisted living facility applications attached. Please review and select the preferred option by Friday." I set the phone face down on the table and focused on the ice cream melting into pale pools around the pie crust. Across from me, a young father was cutting up pancakes for his daughter, maybe 4 years old. She was chattering about something, animated and excited, syrup on her cheeks. The man listened to every word like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard. That used to be me and Melissa. Every Saturday morning, this exact booth, her small hands sticky with syrup as she told me about her week. She'd had such big dreams then. She wanted to be a veterinarian, or maybe a teacher, or possibly a princess if that was still an option. I'd promised her she could be anything she wanted, do anything she set her mind to. The irony wasn't lost on me now. She'd become exactly what I'd promised she could be, anything she wanted. And what she wanted, apparently, was to be someone who could throw away 40 years of love without blinking. The phone rang, jarring me back to the present. The name on the screen was familiar. Miller's Hardware. Probably about the delivery I'd scheduled for next week. I let it go to voicemail. There would be time for mundane concerns later. After I hung up, I sat in the booth for another hour, watching families come and go. Young couples sharing meals, elderly pairs reading newspapers in comfortable silence, children making messes while their parents laughed. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that across the room sat a man whose daughter had just revealed exactly who she'd become. The sun was setting when I finally drove back to the Motel 6. The neon sign flickered erratically, and the parking lot was half empty. My room key card barely worked on the third try. Inside, the air conditioner wheezed and rattled, fighting a losing battle against the October humidity. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my duffel bag in the corner. Everything I owned in the world now reduced to one small bag of clothes and medications. My phone buzzed with another text from Melissa. "Realtor coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. for photos. Make sure you're not there." No concern about where I was sleeping. No acknowledgement that she'd made her own father homeless. Just logistics and real estate considerations. I thought about calling her back, trying one more time to reach the daughter I'd raised. But what was the point? She'd made her position clear. I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Nothing more. Later that night, unable to sleep on the lumpy mattress, I remembered the shoebox hidden in my closet, the letters Barbara had written for me to open when the time was right. They were still in the house, buried behind my winter coats. If Melissa was staging the house for sale, she'd probably cleared out the closets by now. Those letters, the last words my wife had left for me, might already be in some donation bin or dumpster. The thought made my hands shake with more than just grief. Those letters were all I had left of Barbara's voice, her wisdom, her love, and now they might be gone forever, just like everything else Melissa had decided was worthless. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to trucks rumble past on Highway 9, wondering if this was how it ended. A 70-year-old man dying alone in a cheap motel while his daughter counted her inheritance and planned her next real estate investment. But as dawn broke through the thin curtains, I couldn't shake the feeling that Barbara had anticipated this too. She'd always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. If she'd left me letters, she'd have found a way to make sure I'd get them, even if our daughter tried to throw them away with the rest of our life together. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old money. Jennifer Martinez sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against a stack of legal documents. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp intelligence that came with expensive education and ruthless ambition. Melissa sat beside me, but she might as well have been on another planet. She'd worn her power suit navy blue with gold buttons and kept checking her phone every 30 seconds. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter has made arrangements for your transition to Sunset Manor," Ms. Martinez began, sliding a manila folder across the desk. Her voice was crisp, efficient, the kind of tone people used when discussing property transfers or livestock sales. "The facility comes highly recommended. They specialize in elderly care with limited financial resources." I opened the folder without touching the pages. Color photographs showed a low beige building surrounded by generic landscaping. The lobby featured plastic plants and fluorescent lighting. In one image, elderly residents sat in wheelchairs arranged in a semicircle, watching a television mounted too high on the wall. Their faces were blank, absent, like they were waiting for something that would never come. "The application requires a cosigner for the financial guarantee," Ms. Martinez continued. "Given your current circumstances, your daughter has generously agreed to serve in that capacity." She gestured toward Melissa, who finally looked up from her phone long enough to nod. I closed the folder with more force than necessary. The sound echoed in the quiet office like a gunshot. "What if I refuse?" Miss Martinez exchanged a look with Melissa. It was quick, practiced. They'd rehearsed this conversation. "Mr. Thompson, you currently have no income, no assets, and your daughter is under no legal obligation to support you. This arrangement represents a practical solution to a difficult situation." Melissa shifted in her chair, crossing and uncrossing her legs. The leather squeaked under her weight. "Dad, be reasonable. You can't take care of yourself anymore. Yesterday I found you trying to pay the electric bill with a check written to the grocery store. You put salt in your coffee instead of sugar. You're forgetting things. The accusations hung in the air like smoke. Some of them were true. I had been distracted lately, making small mistakes. But forgetting things? That was different. That was the beginning of the end, and we all knew it. "I'm grieving, Melissa. I lost the woman I loved for 41 years. Of course, I'm not thinking clearly." "Grief doesn't pay bills," she said quietly, but her voice carried steel underneath. "Grief doesn't change the fact that you're 70 years old, with no retirement savings because you spent everything on Mom's medical care that didn't even save her." The words hit like physical blows. I gripped the arms of my chair, feeling the leather give way under my fingers. Miss Martinez was taking notes now, probably documenting my reactions for some file that would follow me to my grave. "Those medical bills were for your mother, for the woman who gave you life, who sacrificed everything, who chose to fight a battle she couldn't win," Melissa interrupted. "We could have made different choices. hospice care, comfort measures. Instead, you drained our savings chasing miracles that didn't exist. She opened her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. But I'd been watching her for 35 years. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of anger finally being released. I stood up, my knees protesting after sitting too long. The office windows overlooked downtown, where people in expensive suits walked purposefully between glass towers. Normal people with normal problems, going about their normal lives. Your mother wanted to fight, too. She wanted every day she could get with you, with me. I wasn't about to tell her no. And look where that got us, Melissa said, standing as well. She was taller than me now, especially in her heels. When did that happen? When did my little girl become someone who could look down on me literally and figuratively? She's gone anyway, and now you're broke. We're both paying for your noble gesture. Miss Martinez cleared her throat. Perhaps we could focus on the practical matters at hand. Mr. Thompson, the facility requires a decision within 48 hours. If you're unwilling to sign voluntarily, there are other legal avenues we can explore. Her smile was thin, professional. The kind of smile sharks probably wore before they bit. I walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. 40 floors below, the city hummed with activity. People building lives, making plans, moving forward. Up here in this sterile office, we were discussing the systematic disposal of a human being who'd outlived his usefulness. What other legal options? Adult Protective Services can initiate proceedings if there's concern about an elderly person's ability to care for themselves, Ms. Martinez explained. Given your recent incidents and your current living situation, a case could be made. The threat was clear. Sign the papers voluntarily, or they'd have me declared incompetent. Either way, I'd end up in the same place, warehoused with other inconvenient elderly people, forgotten by the families who once claimed to love them. I turned back to face my daughter, searching her face for any sign of the child I'd raised. Is this really what you want? To throw away 40 years of family? Melissa's jaw tightened. She picked up her purse and stood, smoothing down her skirt with sharp, angry movements. You threw it away when you chose Mom's medical treatments over our family's financial security. I'm just dealing with the consequences. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. You have until tomorrow night to decide. After that, we do this the hard way. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than a slam. Miss Martinez shuffled her papers, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Thompson, I know this is difficult, but your daughter is trying to do what's best for everyone involved. Sometimes families have to make hard choices. I gathered the manila folder and tucked it under my arm. Miss Martinez, do you have children? She looked up, surprised by the question. Yes, a son. He's 8. Does he know you love him? Her expression softened slightly. Of course. Then you can't possibly understand what's happening here. I walked toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Because if he knew you loved him, truly knew it, he'd never be able to do this to you, no matter how much money was involved. The elevator ride down seemed to take forever. 40 floors of descent, each one marking another level of my fall from grace. In the lobby, I sat on a marble bench and pulled out my phone. My contact list was depressingly short. A few old colleagues who'd probably forgotten I existed, the family doctor, the pharmacy, and one name that made me pause, staring at the screen. Barbara Sell. I'd never deleted her number, couldn't bring myself to erase that last connection, even though the line had been disconnected months ago. Sometimes, late at night, I'd call it just to hear the automated message telling me the number was no longer in service. It was pathetic, but it was all I had left of her voice. The manila folder felt heavy in my hands. Inside were forms that would sign away my independence, my dignity, my right to make my own choices. All I had to do was write my name, and the problem of Richard Thompson would be solved. Melissa could get on with her life, her investments, her grand plans. I could disappear into institutional anonymity. But as I sat there in that marble lobby, surrounded by the sounds of success and ambition, I remembered something Barbara used to say when Melissa was small and particularly stubborn. That child has more determination than sense. Someday it'll either make her great or destroy her. Maybe both. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number again. Dad, decision time. Facility called. They need an answer by 6 p.m. or the spot goes to someone else. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I typed back slowly, my thumbs unfamiliar with the tiny keyboard. Your mother left me something you should know about before you finalize any arrangements. The response came immediately. What are you talking about? I smiled for the first time in days. It felt strange, like using muscles I'd forgotten I had. Then I typed the words that would change everything. I've known about the conditions in your mother's will from the very beginning, every single requirement, every consequence of failing to meet them. My phone rang within seconds. Melissa's voice was sharp, panicked. What conditions? What are you talking about? The $44 million comes with strings attached, sweetheart. Strings you would have learned about if you hadn't run out of the lawyer's office the moment you heard the dollar amount. I could hear her sharp intake of breath through the phone. Your mother required you to provide full-time care for me. 2 years. In the family home. You had 30 days to begin, and you failed on day 1. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You knew? This whole time, you knew? I was sitting right there when Davidson read the complete will. But you were already gone, probably calculating how quickly you could get to the bank. I stood up from the marble bench, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in days. Your mother wanted to see who you really were when you thought no one was watching. Congratulations, Melissa. You passed her test with flying colors. You son of a bitch! Her voice cracked with fury and desperation. You let me throw you out. You let me make arrangements for that facility. You watched me destroy my relationship with my own father for money that isn't even mine? Money that could still be yours, I said quietly. If you can prove you're capable of being the daughter she raised instead of the stranger you've become. Her breathing was ragged now, like she was hyperventilating. How long do I have? If the 30 days are up, how long do I have before I lose everything? That depends entirely on what you do in the next 24 hours, I said. Meet me at Davidson's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. Both of us. It's time you heard the complete truth about what your mother really thought of the woman you'd become. I hung up before she could respond and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. Behind me I could hear my phone buzzing incessantly with calls and texts, but I didn't look back. For the first time since Barbara's funeral, I held all the cards. And tomorrow, Melissa would finally understand the true cost of treating family like a business transaction. I arrived at Harold Davidson's office 15 minutes early, just as I'd done for every important appointment in my adult life. The same brick building, the same warm reception area, the same sense of quiet competence that had made Barbara choose this firm over the flashier downtown alternatives. Margaret, the secretary, smiled when she saw me. Mr. Thompson, right on time, and Miss Thompson should be here any moment. She gestured toward the familiar waiting area. Mr. Davidson wanted to see both of you together today. I settled into one of the leather chairs, the manila folder from Davidson balanced on my lap. Inside were copies of all the documents I'd helped Barbara review over the past year, the real will, the trust agreements, the careful provisions she'd insisted on including, documents that Melissa had stormed out before hearing about, too eager to celebrate her windfall to listen to the conditions attached. The front door chimed, and Melissa walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. She wore another power suit, this one charcoal gray, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed she controlled $44 million. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Dad? What are you doing here?" She looked around the office suspiciously. "And why did Mr. Davidson wants to see both of us? I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket. Because it's time you learned the whole truth about your mother's will. The parts you didn't stay to hear about. Before she could respond, Harold Davidson emerged from his inner office. His expression was serious, professional, tinged with the kind of careful neutrality that came from decades of delivering difficult news to families in crisis. Miss Thompson, Mr. Thompson, please come in. We have some important matters to discuss. The conference room felt different this time, less celebratory, more somber. Davidson had arranged the documents in careful stacks, each one labeled with small yellow sticky notes. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows seemed harsher, casting sharp shadows across the mahogany table. "Melissa," Davidson began, settling into his chair across from us. "When you left the will reading 4 days ago, there were still several pages of conditions and requirements that we hadn't covered. Your father asked me to schedule this meeting so you could hear the complete terms of your inheritance." Melissa glanced between Davidson and me, confusion flickering across her features. "Conditions? What conditions?" The will was straightforward. Mom left everything to me. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. "She left everything to you conditionally, sweetheart. There are requirements attached to that $44 million, requirements that you've already violated." Davidson opened the top folder and pulled out the document I knew by heart, now the real will, complete with all its carefully crafted provisions. "The inheritance your mother left you comes with very specific obligations, Ms. Thompson. You must provide full-time care for your father in the family home for a minimum of 2 years from the date the will was read." The color drained from Melissa's face. She reached for the papers with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the legal language she'd been too impatient to hear just 4 days ago. This can't be right. I never agreed to this. Agreed to—" "You didn't need to agree," I said quietly. "Your mother made the terms very clear. If you fail to meet the care requirements, the entire inheritance transfers to a trust that I control." Melissa's hands shook as she read through the conditions. 2 years of full-time care, living in the family home, regular medical checkups, and documentation of my well-being, provisions for my comfort, dignity, and emotional support. Everything that Barbara had known our daughter would try to avoid. "But I didn't know," Melissa whispered, looking up from the papers with desperate eyes. "If I'd known about these conditions, I would have made different choices." "Would you?" I asked. "Because when Davidson finished reading the first part of the will, the part about the money, you were so excited that you grabbed your purse and practically ran out of here. You didn't want to hear about obligations or responsibilities. You just wanted to get to the bank." Her face went white as the memory hit her. "You were there. You heard everything." She turned to stare at me with growing horror. "You knew about the conditions from the very beginning." "Every single word," I confirmed. "I sat right here and listened as Davidson explained exactly what your mother expected from you." "But you were already mentally spending the money, weren't you? Already planning your escape from the burden of caring for your aging father." Melissa shot to her feet, her chair clattering backward. "You bastard! You let me throw you out of the house. You let me make those horrible statements, knowing the whole time that I was destroying my own inheritance?" "I'll let you show me exactly who you are," I replied calmly. "Your mother wanted to know if you were capable of putting family first when you thought there was nothing in it for you. The answer, apparently, is no." Her phone started ringing on the conference table. The caller ID showed Marcus Williams. She stared at it with growing panic. "Oh God, the investors. I told them I could transfer $20 million by Friday. I signed legal commitments based on money I thought was guaranteed." Davidson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Miss Thompson, perhaps you should—" "Answer it," I said firmly. "Let's see how you explain to your business partners that the money you promised them comes with conditions you never bothered to learn about." Melissa's hands trembled as she answered the phone. "Marcus? Hi, What? No, I can't talk right now. There's been a complication with the inheritance." Her voice grew higher, more strained. "No, I don't know when I'll have access to the funds." There are conditions I wasn't aware of. Marcus Williams' voice was loud enough for all of us to hear through the speaker. Conditions? Melissa, we signed agreements yesterday. My investors are expecting the capital transfer by the end of week. If you can't deliver. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I need time, she said desperately. Just give me a few days to sort this out. Days? We don't have days. The Riverside project closes next Tuesday. If we miss this window, the opportunity is gone forever. His voice turned cold, professional. I'm calling an emergency meeting with my board. If you can't guarantee the funds by Monday morning, we're moving to our backup financing option. And Melissa, don't ever contact us again. The line went dead. Melissa stared at the phone in her hand like it had just bitten her. 20 years, she whispered. 20 years of building relationships, establishing credibility. Gone in one phone call. Her phone immediately started ringing again. This time it was Jennifer Martinez, then another investor, then another. Each call was the same: panic, accusations, threats of legal action. The carefully constructed house of cards that was her business empire was collapsing in real time, right in front of us. Make it stop, she begged, turning to me with tears streaming down her face. Please, Dad. Tell me how to fix this. Tell me what I have to do. I stood up slowly, gathering the legal documents that would determine both our futures. You fix it by becoming the daughter your mother believed you could be. If you still have it in you. The drive from Davidson's office was silent, except for the hum of Melissa's BMW engine and the occasional sniffle from the passenger seat. She'd insisted on driving, probably needing something to control in a situation where she'd just learned she had no control at all. I sat beside her, watching familiar streets pass by through the window, remembering all the times I'd driven this same route with Barbara after meeting with Davidson to plan for exactly this moment. We pulled into the driveway of the house that Melissa had been so eager to sell just that morning. The for sale sign she'd ordered was leaning against the garage, never actually planted in the yard. Even the realtor hadn't had time to complete the staging before everything changed. Inside, the house felt different. Less like a museum of discarded memories and more like what it had always been, a home where a family had lived and loved and learned hard lessons about what really mattered. Melissa moved through the rooms slowly, as if seeing them for the first time, or perhaps seeing them clearly for the first time in years. The movers were supposed to come tomorrow, she said quietly, running her fingers along the mantelpiece where Barbara's photo still sat. I was going to have them pack everything for donation. She picked up the silver frame, studying her mother's face. She knew I'd do that, didn't she? She knew I'd try to erase all of this. I settled into my recliner, the one piece of furniture that had never been marked for removal. Your mother knew a lot of things. She spent the last year of her life planning for this conversation. Melissa sat down on the couch, still holding her mother's photograph. The money I've already spent, the contracts I signed, what happens to all of that? That depends on what you do next, I said. Davidson explained the options. You can fulfill the care requirements for the remaining time, approximately 22 months, and keep everything. Or you can walk away, and I'll file the paperwork to transfer the inheritance to the trust. She set the photo down carefully and looked around the room, at the family portraits, the furniture we'd collected over decades of marriage, the small details that made this place ours. 22 months of taking care of you, here, in this house. 22 months of being a daughter, I corrected. The kind of daughter your mother raised you to be before you forgot what that meant. Melissa's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another text from Marcus Williams, probably wondering why she hadn't shown up for their dinner meeting. She glanced at it, then turned the phone face down without reading the message. I told my investors I could transfer $20 million by Friday, she said. I signed binding agreements based on money I thought was mine, free and clear. If I can't deliver. She trailed off, the implications hanging in the air between us. "Then you'll learn what your mother learned when she built her business from nothing," I said. "That failure isn't permanent unless you give up. That rebuilding is possible if you're willing to do the work." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Rebuilding with what?" "If I stay here to take care of you, I can't run my business. I can't travel for meetings or work 18-hour days or schmooze with investors. My career will be over." "Your career as what?" I asked. "Someone who makes money by moving other people's money around? Someone who sees every relationship as a transaction?" I leaned forward, studying her face. "When did you stop wanting to help people and start wanting to use them?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She slumped back against the couch cushions, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking completely. "I don't know. It happened so gradually, I didn't even notice. First, it was just about being successful enough to take care of myself. Then it was about being successful enough to take care of you and Mom. Then it was just about being successful. Period. And now?" She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Now I'm sitting in my childhood home, realizing that I was about to sell the last connection I had to the only people who ever really loved me. For money. For fucking money." It was the first time I'd heard her curse in years. Somehow, it made her sound more like the daughter I remembered, the one who'd gotten passionate about things that mattered, who'd fought for causes she believed in, who'd once wanted to change the world instead of just profit from it. "Your mother included something else in the will," I said, pulling out the envelope Davidson had given me. "A letter she wrote specifically for you." For this moment. Melissa's hands trembled as she took the cream-colored paper. The envelope was sealed with the same wax Barbara had used for my letter, but this one was marked with Melissa's name in her mother's careful script. She broke the seal slowly, as if afraid of what she might find inside. She read silently, her eyes moving across the page. I watched her expression change from wariness to surprise to something that might have been hope. Tears started falling again, but these were different, quieter, more genuine. "She says she's proud of me," Melissa whispered. "Even knowing what I might do, she says she's proud of the woman I could become if I choose to remember who I really am." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How could she be proud of someone who was ready to throw her own father away?" "Because she knew that wasn't really you," I said. "That was fear. Fear of being responsible for someone else's happiness. Fear of sacrificing your own ambitions for love. Fear of becoming the kind of person who puts family first, even when it costs you something you think you want more." Melissa folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest. "If I do this, if I stay here and take care of you, what does that look like? What would you need from me?" I thought about Barbara's last months, when every day had been a gift, and every moment together had felt precious, despite the pain and fear and uncertainty. Mostly just your presence, someone to talk to over breakfast, someone to drive me to doctor appointments and remember to give me my medications, someone to sit with me when the loneliness gets too heavy. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Someone who sees taking care of me as a privilege, not a burden. And if I can't do it, if I try and fail, then you fail with dignity, and I'll know you tried. I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece where Barbara's last photo still sat in its silver frame. My wife was smiling in the picture, but her eyes looked tired. "But there's something else you need to understand, Melissa. Something your mother wrote about you that I haven't shared yet." I reached into my jacket and pulled out another letter one I'd been saving for this moment. The paper was the same cream-colored stock, but this envelope was marked, "For Melissa, the difficult truth." Melissa's face went pale. "What is that?" "Your mother wrote 2 letters about you. One was full of hope and love, the one you just read. This one," I held up the sealed envelope, "this one contains her real thoughts about the woman you'd become." The observations she made during her final months when she watched you calculate the cost of everything and the value of nothing. "Dad, please." Don't. She wrote about the day you suggested she should skip her last round of chemotherapy because it was throwing good money after bad. She wrote about how you complained that her medical appointments were interfering with your work schedule. She wrote about the time you asked if we'd considered more economical end-of-life options. With each revelation, Melissa seemed to shrink into herself. I was scared. I didn't want to lose her. You were worried about the cost, I corrected. There's a difference. I broke the wax seal on the second letter. She wrote, I'm watching my daughter become someone I don't recognize, someone who sees her dying mother as a financial liability, someone who views her father's love as a burden to be managed rather than a gift to be treasured. Melissa was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. Stop, please stop. But I continued reading. If she can't find her way back to love when everything is on the line, then perhaps losing everything is exactly what she needs to remember who she used to be. The letter slipped from my hands as Melissa collapsed to her knees on the hardwood floor. Her designer suit was rumpled, her perfect makeup ruined by tears, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. She looked like what she was, a lost little girl who'd forgotten how to come home. I can't undo what I said to you, she whispered. I can't take back throwing you out or treating you like you were disposable. How can you ever forgive me for that? I knelt beside her on the floor where I'd once helped her with homework, where she'd played with her toys, where she'd taken her first steps toward her mother's waiting arms. Because that's what love is, sweetheart. It's unforgivable. It's choosing to see the best in someone, even when they can't see it in themselves. She threw her arms around me then, clinging to me like she used to during thunderstorms when she was small. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are, I said, holding my broken daughter as she cried out years of accumulated greed and loneliness and fear. But being sorry isn't enough. You have to choose to be different. Every single day, you have to choose love over money, family over ambition, connection over convenience. Her phone, which had been buzzing incessantly on the coffee table, finally fell silent. The outside world, with its demands and obligations and failed promises, could wait. Right now, there was only a father and daughter trying to find their way back to each other across the wreckage of everything they'd almost lost. I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, lying in the half-darkness of early morning, I thought it was Barbara. My hand reached across the empty mattress before memory crashed back like cold water. Barbara was gone. But someone was downstairs cooking breakfast in our kitchen. My robe hung on the back of the bedroom door where it had hung for 20 years. I pulled it on and padded downstairs, my bare feet silent against the hardwood steps. In the kitchen, Melissa stood at the stove with her back to me. She was wearing jeans. When was the last time I'd seen her in jeans? And one of Barbara's old aprons, the one with the faded sunflower pattern. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the elaborate styles she usually favored. "Morning, Dad." She didn't turn around, but her voice was different. Softer, uncertain. "I hope you don't mind." I found eggs in the fridge and thought, well, I thought you might be hungry. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of family meals, the same table where I'd helped Melissa with homework, where Barbara and I had paid bills and planned vacations and dreamed about the future. "What time did you get here?" "About 6. She flipped the bacon with the spatula Barbara had bought at a church rummage sale 15 years ago. "I've been here all night, actually." I slept on the couch. She finally turned to face me, and I saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "I couldn't go home. I couldn't face my apartment knowing what I'd said to you." She brought me a plate of eggs and bacon, perfectly cooked. The coffee was strong, the way I liked it. She'd remembered details I didn't even know she'd noticed. "What happened with your dinner? The investors?" Melissa sat down across from me with her own plate, though she didn't eat. She just pushed the eggs around with her fork, creating small yellow valleys in the white. I called them, told them I'd had a family emergency and needed to postpone. She looked up at me briefly, then back down at her untouched food. I told them the truth, actually, that I'd made commitments I couldn't keep and needed time to reassess my priorities. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times from the living room. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up, garbage trucks rumbling down the street, dogs barking, the ordinary sounds of ordinary mornings. That must have been a difficult conversation. Marcus hung up on me. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 20 years of networking, building relationships, establishing credibility, gone in one phone call. She set down her fork and wrapped her hands around her coffee mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Jennifer's been calling every hour since yesterday. Apparently, there are legal implications when you promise investors money you don't actually have access to. I ate my breakfast slowly, tasting every bite. Melissa had seasoned the eggs exactly the way Barbara used to, just a touch of pepper, no salt. Details that showed she'd been paying attention all those years, even when it seemed like she wasn't. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." She stood up and walked to the window that overlooked Barbara's garden. The roses were still blooming, red and white against the morning light. "I've spent so many years focused on building something big, something impressive. I forgot about building something that matters." She pressed her palm against the glass. "Mom tried to tell me, didn't she? All those conversations about family, about what really lasts. I thought she was just being sentimental." I finished my coffee and joined her at the window. The garden needed work. Weeds were starting to take over, and some of the rose bushes needed pruning. Barbara would have been out there already, hands deep in the soil, coaxing life from the earth with the same patience she'd used to raise our daughter. "Your mother was the wisest person I ever knew. She saw things the rest of us missed." Melissa's reflection in the window showed tear tracks on her cheeks. "I read the rest of her letter last night, the part you didn't read to me." She reached into her jeans pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She wrote about you too, about how proud she was of the man she married, how grateful she was that you'd always put family first, even when it cost you everything." I had to swallow twice before I could speak. I'd read that part of the letter the night before, sitting alone in our bedroom with only the bedside lamp for company. Barbara's words had been like a final gift, a reminder of the love that had sustained us through 4 decades of marriage. "She also wrote about hope," Melissa continued, "about believing that people can change if they're given the right motivation. She said she was counting on me to remember who I used to be before I got so lost." She turned away from the window to face me directly. "I want to try, Dad. I want to be the daughter she believed I could be again." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the calculated charm she'd perfected over the years. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "It won't be easy. Taking care of an old man who gets confused sometimes, who needs help with things he used to do by himself. It's not glamorous work. Neither was taking care of Mom," she said quietly. "But you did it anyway. For 5 years, you put her needs before your own. You never complained, never made her feel like a burden. You just loved her." She walked back to the table and began clearing away the breakfast dishes. "I want to learn how to love like that." The phone rang, jarring us both. Melissa glanced at it, then at me. "That's probably Jennifer again, or Marcus, or someone else whose money I've put at risk." She let it ring. "I'll have to face all of that eventually. But right now, I just want to be here with you." I helped her wash the dishes, our movements settling into an easy rhythm. She washed, I dried, like we'd done when she was small and eager to help with grown-up tasks. The silence between us was comfortable now, no longer charged with anger and resentment. "There's something else," she said as we finished. "I want to learn about Mom's garden. I know she tried to teach me when I was younger, but I was always too busy with other things. I thought maybe Maybe you could show me what she would have wanted." We spent the morning outside, pulling weeds and deadheading roses. Melissa's manicured nails got dirty, her expensive jeans stained with soil, but she didn't complain. She listened carefully as I explained Barbara's system, which plants needed more water, which ones preferred shade, how to tell when the roses were ready for pruning. She planted the white ones for hope, I told her, showing her the bushes near the back fence. The red ones for love. She said as long as they kept blooming, our family would be strong. Melissa knelt beside the white roses, her fingers gentle against the petals. "They're still blooming." "Yes," I said. "They are." That afternoon, we drove to the cemetery together. Melissa brought fresh flowers, white roses from Barbara's garden. We stood at the gravestone in comfortable silence, each lost in our own memories and regrets. When we finally spoke, it wasn't about trust funds or legal documents or business obligations. We talked about Barbara, her laugh, her terrible cooking, her fierce love for both of us. "I miss her every day," Melissa said as we walked back to the car. "So do I replied. "But she's still here, in the choices we make, in the way we treat each other." 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen, watching Melissa make dinner. She's gotten better at cooking, not as good as Barbara was, but better than I ever expected. She moves around the kitchen with growing confidence, adding spices and tasting sauces like she's been doing it for years instead of months. The investor situation resolved itself eventually. Melissa negotiated payment plans with the people she owed money to, liquidated some of her inheritance to cover the immediate debts, and started over with a smaller, more sustainable business plan. She still works hard, but she comes home every night. She checks on me in the mornings, makes sure I take my medications, drives me to doctor appointments without complaint. More importantly, she's learned to listen. When I tell her stories about her childhood, she doesn't check her phone. When I get confused about what day it is, she gently reminds me without making me feel foolish. When I wake up in the middle of the night, missing Barbara so much it hurts to breathe, I find her in the kitchen making tea, waiting to sit with me until the loneliness passes. The inheritance remains hers, its conditions fulfilled through genuine care and love. Enough for us to live comfortably, to maintain the house, to honor Barbara's memory in the ways that matter. Melissa has stopped talking about get-rich-quick schemes or high-risk investments. She seems to understand finally that some things are more valuable than money. "Dad," she says from the stove, "do you think Mom would be proud of us now?" I look around the kitchen, at the family photos on the refrigerator, at the herb garden visible through the window, at my daughter standing in the same spot where her mother once stood, carrying on traditions she once dismissed as old-fashioned. I think she knew we'd find our way back to each other. She was always 3 steps ahead of the rest of us. Melissa smiles, and for the first time in years, it reaches her eyes. Dinner's ready. We sat down together at the old kitchen table, just like we used to when she was small. The food is simple, but made with care. The conversation flows easily, touching on small things: the garden, the weather, plans for the weekend. Normal family moments that once seemed impossible but now feel natural again. Outside, Barbara's roses continue to bloom, red and white against the evening light. Love and hope, growing side by side in the garden she planted, and the daughter she never stopped believing in. If you enjoyed this story, I hope you'll like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your own family stories matter too. Tell me where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. To hear another tale of family, forgiveness, and second chances, click on the next video. Thank you for spending this time with us, and remember, it's never too late to come home.